In today's video, we'll be talking about what it's like to work remotely as a dermatology provider, specifically referencing my previous experience as a Curology provider. So if you're interested in remote work or you're just curious about your options as a healthcare provider, stay tuned. But first, hi, I'm Laura. I'm a physician assistant turned wellness guide, and I'm here to help you prevent burnout. I'm here to talk about alternative healthcare careers and also take you along my journey while I'm at it. So if this sounds like your vibe, make sure to like and subscribe below. So what is telehealth and why is it growing? Telehealth or telemedicine is the use of technology to provide healthcare services remotely. Now, before the pandemic, I was working at a busy hospital setting and I wasn't even aware that you could provide healthcare services remotely. But obviously after social distancing, we've all become aware that not only is it possible, but it's a rapidly growing industry. According to the consulting company McKinsey & Company, telehealth grew by 38 times from pre-pandemic levels. In general, telehealth makes it easier for patients to be seen at a timely manner, reduces costs, and improves accessibility for those in remote areas or with mobility issues. But what's it like for the clinician? Let's break it down by key factors, starting with schedule. One of the biggest appeals of remote work is schedule flexibility. That means no commuting time, more freedom to schedule personal tasks, and the ability to work from anywhere as long as you have a Wi-Fi connection. At Curology, I was able to structure my day however I wanted. So I really loved being able to meet a friend for lunch or take an appointment without having to take time off work. I was able to sleep in if I wanted to, as long as I met my patient quota for the week. So this meant that if I took it easy on one day, I had to work double time the next day. Or if I slept in one day, then I was probably staying up late to see the patients that were on my dashboard. Basically, this type of flexibility gives you a lot more autonomy over your time, and this was a game changer for many providers, especially those who were parents or those who had a second job. Now, the flip side is that most of us were working 7 days a week. The work is never really done. This is an online platform, and so patients from anywhere can sign up at any time, and even if you were to work 24 hours straight, you'd never really clear your dashboard because there would be always a new patient that would pop up. So I know that that can be really bothersome for some people who just want to leave work at work and then go off and live their lives. You don't really get that separation at all because you always have your laptop with you. And so this translated to us working 7 days a week. It didn't mean that we were working 9 to 5, 7 days a week. It was more like 5 to 6 hours per day, but still there was always something to be done. There was always a patient to be seen. So you have to take that into consideration, that online signups never really shut off or close down. They're always gonna be open, and there's always gonna be something for you to do at any time of any day. And I don't know how it works at other companies, but at Curology, we didn't really get holidays off. There would be a lottery for a holiday that you could request to have off a year, but it was never guaranteed. And so that does mean that you end up working holidays, especially the big ones like Christmas and New Year's. Those are actually the biggest holidays for signups because people are gifting memberships, people are making New Year's health and skin resolutions, a lot of signups. Really funny because my husband and I actually got married on Memorial Day. This was before I was working at Curology, and we thought we were so clever because we're like, oh my God, we're always gonna have our anniversary off. And it turns out for the first 4 years of our marriage, I never had our anniversary off. So just consider the fact that with remote work or an online platform, patients are signing up at all hours and someone needs to be there to see them. Which brings us to workload. Remote healthcare jobs are volume-based rather than shift-based. As I mentioned, I could structure my schedule any way I wanted as long as I met a minimum patient quota for the week. But in periods of high demand, when you just have a set amount of providers, means that you're often working over that threshold. At Curology, new patients needed to be seen within the first 24 hours after sign up. Returning patients had a slightly longer window, but overall, you are supposed to see them as soon as you can. And there were volume spikes during certain seasons. So to give you an example, if we had 10,000 new patients sign up, which I know it sounds like a lot, but it's not that rare. It could be due to the holidays or to an influencer campaign. And let's say that there are 100 providers. That means that each provider is going to get 100 new patients overnight. And they all need to be seen within 24 hours. And that's in addition to any returning patients or other patients that you may have had waiting for you. So there were days where I would see about 200 new patients and like 85 to 100 returning patients. Those were crazy days, I know, but they do happen. Some companies can predict and even drive their volume. Again, they do this by launching new products or working with certain influencers. And so that way they know where there are gonna be spikes, but they can also be unpredictable and they can happen at any time. So one thing to keep in mind is if you like clocking out at a certain time, remote work isn't exactly laid out that way. Now let's talk about the patient cases that you usually see with remote work. Most telehealth companies focus on non-emergent conditions, so cases where you don't need an urgent in-person evaluation. There are a few dermatology-based telehealth companies out now like Curology, Hims & Hers, Ro, and they all tend to focus on conditions like acne, eczema, rosacea, hair loss, and also providing anti-aging treatments. But this is not the place where you go if you have a suspicious mole or like a really bad skin infection. In fact, if we ever saw anything that looked like it required a little bit more care, we would just send them to an inpatient provider. So the good thing about this is that as a provider, you essentially become an expert in those limited conditions that you do see. I mean, who else sees over 200 acne cases a day? But the downside is that only seeing a select few conditions can get boring over time. And if you're the type of provider that really likes hands-on work or doing procedures, then this is definitely gonna feel more like an office job. Now, as far as work environment, not having to go into an office means no office drama, and also you get to work from anywhere you want. I personally loved it. Actually, when I first started working at Curology, we did have an in-person office that we were required to go to 3 days a week, I believe, and it was really fun. It was like the perfect balance. This is where we would go to get training, we would attend lectures, we would get free lunch, we got all types of perks, and there would always be an activity like a yoga class or a mindfulness class. So it was really, really fun to go into the office actually, and I loved interacting with all the other providers and the supervising physicians, and even seeing behind the scenes where the fulfillment and packaging process took place and getting to interact with a lot of the other teams at Curology. Because it was such a new company, we celebrated any milestone that the company reached, and you really felt like you were a part of it. Also, because it was rapidly growing, as a provider, you got to expand your role to work with other departments like marketing or product development or operations, which is a really unique perk of a tech-driven company. But eventually the company's headquarters shut down, and that made work feel a little bit more isolating. There wasn't that interaction with other providers or with the team. Everything is done through Slack or Zoom, and we all know that can get really tiring and old after a while. So if you're the type of person that needs in-person collaboration every day, a remote job may feel a little bit isolating. Work-life balance. More flexibility equals more freedom. More freedom equals better quality of life, right? For some, remote work is a dream because they can travel while they're working, they can spend more time with their loved ones, and they can just avoid the stress of being in a hospital or of having to do a long commute. So it can significantly increase someone's quality of life. However, for other people, it can feel like they're always on. They're always working. Because essentially, when you're working remotely, there is no separation between work and life. That's just what you do, you work. I had a friend who actually left work at Curology and started doing 12-hour shifts at the hospital, and she was significantly happier. She just felt like that way she actually had way more control of her personal time because she was just able to establish better boundaries when it came to work and her personal life. So it really depends on the person. For me, remote work at Curology felt a lot lighter than when I was working inpatient or when I was working at an office. I personally loved the freedom to be able to move cross country and keep my job, or to book a getaway and not have to see if I had enough vacation days. As long as I made time to work during my vacation, I could go wherever I wanted. But then that's the thing, right? You're working during vacation. So you can think about it any way you want. You don't have as clear boundaries over what's work time and what's personal time because you do have that flexibility. You are bringing your work into your personal space. So not only did I end up working on vacation, but sometimes I found myself feeling guilty if I wasn't working on a weekend because I knew that there were patients on my dashboard waiting to be seen. So it's just something you have to consider and know yourself. Are you going to be bothered while you're on vacation, while you are on a weekend, knowing that there are patients waiting to be seen, or are you able to just draw a clear boundary and know that your time is your time and create a schedule that works for you? It's different for everyone. Salary and bonuses. So how does a remote PA salary compare to an in-person PA salary? Based on my experience and a little bit of research, remote providers make slightly less than their in-person peers. According to the AAPA 2023 salary report, the median PA salary is $127,000 per year. My base salary at Curology was less than this, but that didn't deter me because we had a chance to bonus on a quarterly basis. So this meant that if we saw more patients than our minimum threshold, we were able to get a bonus at the end of each quarter. And this wasn't hard or rare because, again, there would be so many unexpected and expected surges in volume that a lot of us found ourselves working over that threshold quite often and bonusing pretty much every quarter. So this translates to the more you work, the more you get paid. And this was really appealing for some providers that would find it very easy to see a large amount of patients. However, for the providers who signed up for more flexibility, for a lighter workload, then working less essentially means you have to be okay with a lower base salary. Now, a big factor to consider right now is job stability. Telehealth is definitely growing, but it's still evolving. Okay, we're still figuring it out. Telehealth companies highly depend on marketing trends, and any tech-related changes or economy shifts will really impact it. So for example, during the pandemic, we literally blew up. We were overwhelmed, so we hired a lot of new providers. But when all of that started to slow down and people were able to go back to their in-person providers, at the same time, there was a change in tech where companies were not allowed to market to people on social media the way that they had been able to before. And this significantly decreased volume. So not only were people going back to normal, but also we weren't able to get to them the way that we were to before. And this led to just a huge slowdown for the company. And they ended up having to let go a lot of the providers that they just hired a few months earlier. So I survived 2 major layoffs before being personally affected by the 3rd one. And I think that there have been at least 2 more big layoffs since then. Whereas my peers who work in offices or in hospitals enjoy a lot more work stability. Like, they don't ever have to deal with these types of issues. So if you're a person that values job security, telehealth might still be a tricky one. And lastly, I'm really quickly gonna mention licensing and state regulations, only because if you're working for a major telehealth company, it means that you're probably seeing patients from all over the US. That means that you'll need a license in all of these different states. And if you've ever applied for a license as a healthcare provider, then you know what a nightmare this is. I actually made a video on applying for a physician assistant license because I wish I'd had a video when I was applying for the first time. It's just such a process. So I just want to make you aware that if you want to work for a telehealth company that sees patients nationwide, you're gonna need a lot of licenses, which can be time consuming and frustrating and costly. The bright side is that most companies actually have a licensing team that can handle this for you, or at the very least help you and keep you organized so that you can keep up with the requirements. But this is something you definitely want to ask if you are applying to work at a remote company. Make sure that they have a licensing team. And hey, if you already have multiple licenses, then you'd probably be a perfect candidate for applying to a remote job as a PA. Final thoughts. Is a remote healthcare job right for you? Remote work is great if you love flexibility and want to create your own schedule, if you enjoy independent work, and if you want to develop non-clinical skills and become an expert in a set amount of cases that you will handle. Remote work is not going to be a great fit for you if you need hands-on patient care and the ability to do procedures. If you thrive in an in-person collaborative environment more than you would on Zoom and Slack, and if you want a strict work-life separation. Let me know in the comments, would you consider working as a remote healthcare provider? Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, give me a like, leave me a comment, and obviously subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any of the stuff that I publish in the future. And I will see you next time.